What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is March 2nd, Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. We may not be able to take as many phone calls as we would normally like to do. And a couple of quick program notes. The lovely Lady Claire has confirmed she will be with us hour number 3 tomorrow. She's almost completely recovered from whatever it was that hit her last week. And thanks to everybody who sent their get well wishes and so forth and so on here. Before we get into the news, though, I want to do an on-air acknowledgement. You probably heard this caller over the last couple of days saying that he'd sent us a gift, and it arrived today. And it is a Block-It Pocket. There were other things in the package as well. And this is kind of a nice thing to have. He sent it in response to the story about how a few Christmases back, Claire had one of her radio chip-enabled credit cards snarfed by somebody walking around with a backpack and a laptop and whatever else it takes to read those things, and wound up making purchases on her card somewhere in the middle of the mainland, including rock concert tickets and everything. So I'd originally thought it was going to be one of the paper ones, but this is very well made, very heavy cloth. There's actually two pockets, one on the outside where you can put non-sensitive things, and then the main pocket, which is lined, and radio frequency. In fact, as an experiment, I threw my iPhone in there, and it was cut off completely from the outside. So thank you very much for this and for all the other goodies that you included with that package as well. Now, getting on to the news, we are seeing the beginning of this obvious effort to discredit Donald Trump, to attack all of his lieutenants, to continue to attack him. We're seeing all this ridiculous editorials out there trying to undermine the amazing speech Donald Trump gave before Congress the other day. And they're trying to just spin it in the worst possible light. And for people who did not actually watch the speech, some of their comments might actually be convincing. And, of course, it's all more fake news here, but there are growing concerns about how Clinton and Obama are working to discredit Donald Trump, possibly get him removed from office, or at least try and pick off his lieutenants one at a time. And, of course, Attorney General Sessions is now in the crosshairs. They're trying to get rid of him, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit here. But basically, looking at this article over in Voltaire Net, saying that in their efforts to bring down Donald Trump, the Clinton-Bush-Obama cartel, if you will, could actually bring down our entire government. And we know that George Soros would not be entirely opposed to seeing that happen in order to install a pro-globalist junta to rule over our country. But right now, our nation is under threat from all this subversive activity. Plus, it's destroying our public image around the world to see these politicians behaving this way. Now then, they're making a big stink over in Congress about Attorney General Sessions and the fact that he did, in fact, meet with the Russian ambassador last year and failed to mention that during his confirmation hearing. Nancy Pelosi managed to get her face unpuckered long enough to scream that he's got to be replaced, he's got to step down. Chuck Schumer is out there demanding a special prosecutor, meaning somebody under the control of the Democrats, to continue smearing Trump with the claim of Russian connections. Now, the Justice Department is acknowledging that Sessions spoke with the Russian ambassador in 2016. Now, here is where things are getting a little bit gray. First of all, where were all these strident voices when Hillary was trying to steal the election, or when Obama was looting Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to make the subsidies on Obamacare? Not a peep out of these people. Now, during his confirmation hearing, Sessions was asked specifically about anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign being in contact with the Russians, much like back in 2008 when McCain was soliciting illegal donations from Russia. Now, Sessions back then was a senator, and there's a possibility that his conversations with the Russian ambassador were about some government business. And in the context of somebody from the campaign communicating with the Russians, if they didn't talk about the campaign, then Sessions didn't do anything improper. But they're out for blood. They've got him in the crosshairs. And I think what is going on here is pretty obvious to everybody. There are a lot of people inside the establishment who are terrified of prosecution for crimes and corruptions that were basically acceptable behavior under Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama. And they're trying to paralyze the Department of Justice, perhaps get one of their own in as the Attorney General to protect themselves. Somebody like another Loretta Lynch who's going to sit there looking at felony violations of Title 18 and say, it's no big deal, but we're going to sue those global warming deniers out of business. Now, this idea that Russia possibly influenced our elections is another case of double standards and hypocrisy by the corporate media and by the establishment. Before I go into details, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. But the reality is the United States has been interfering in everybody else's elections, which makes it hypocritical for them to scream that Russia was trying to influence ours. The Obama State Department spent $350,000 for campaign infrastructure used against Netanyahu in the Israel election. Remember when Victoria Nuland admitted the U.S. spent $5 billion to change the government in Ukraine. Obama tried to influence the Brexit vote. CIA was involved in the French 2012 presidential election, and not the first time they've been messing with that. It is hypocritical for the United States to be tinkering with everybody else's elections around the world and then get into a high dudgeon that Russia may have tried to influence ours. Now, first of all, I'd like to remind everybody that back in 2008, when John McCain did approach Russia's ambassador to the United Nations about an illegal campaign donation, Russia refused because it is illegal. So Russia's towing the line on that. And again, nobody's actually come up with any evidence of any kind that Russia had anything to do with our election. All the election fraud so far has been favoring Hillary Clinton. It seems to be originating, shall we say, domestically. Now, Democratic Senator McCaskill made a claim she'd never met with the Russian ambassador. That's now been blown open. She did. Nobody's screaming about removing her. And when we come onto the subject of the Attorney General lying to Congress, well, Sessions may have simply forgot that he said hi to the ambassador on 2 occasions. But remember when Eric Holder lied to Congress about the Fast and Furious gun-running program that was sending military weapons to the drug cartels in Mexico? And it came out he lied. Nobody demanded he step down. It's another classic case of double standards and hypocrisy. And let's be honest, this Russia ties is a distraction. What the old guard is trying to do is surround Trump with so much controversy and noise that the corporate media doesn't have to report on some of the other things that are now provable and coming on out, such as the fact that Obama took millions of dollars of taxpayer money and put it into a special slush fund over at the Justice Department that was used to tinker with other countries. And apparently this slush fund was bankrolling leftist groups. And let's not forget how Obama looted Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to cover the Obamacare subsidies, just like Bill Clinton looted Social Security to make his magic federal budget surplus. They're being very, very selective in their anger and ire, aren't they? Now, do you remember back when there was this dossier that John McCain took to the FBI that was written by this former British spy, Christopher Steele? And he put together this dossier that claimed Trump and 2 prostitutes had vandalized the presidential suite at the Moscow Hotel. And it turned out to be complete nonsense, complete fake news, and the corporate media had a field day with it. The story is just now breaking that apparently the group that originally funded Christopher Steele to produce this dossier was about to cut off payments to him, the FBI stepped on in to make a deal where they were going to keep paying him to do what he was doing. Now, exactly when this happened, we're not sure, but that's an issue that needs to be looked at. Now, the lawsuit against BuzzFeed for publishing that discredited dossier is now moving over to the federal court. And the suit was brought by Cyprus-based tech mogul Alexei Gubarev, who was mentioned in the dossier. And the case was transferred Tuesday at BuzzFeed's request from the local Florida court to the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida in Miami, where they feel they're going to get a better result from the lawsuit. Trying to cherry-pick the court and the judge to get the case to go the way they want. Now, one of the alarming things we're seeing right now is despite Trump's success, despite Trump's approval ratings, the Democrats are actually going harder to the left under their new leadership. And they're getting more and more extreme out there. They were trying to move centrist for the election. They didn't win the election. And now they're just heading back on out. Hard left, hard left, hard left, pushing all of those hot button issues, or shall we say lukewarm button issues, because people are just starting to turn them off. Now, here is something that happened interestingly. Tom Perez has won the chairmanship of the Democratic Party, or the chairpersonship. I keep forgetting there are liberals over there. And Trump tweeted out, "Congratulations to Thomas Perez, who's just been named chairman of the DNC. I could not be happier for him or for the Republican Party." A little bit of a dig, I think, or it could be interpreted that way. And maybe that's exactly the way Perez did interpret it, because Perez replied back, "Call me Tom and don't get too happy. Keith Ellison and I and Democrats united across the country will be your worst nightmare." And then after he sent that, something totally unexpected happened. Democrats started posting on Twitter saying, "How dare you?" Democrats were attacking Perez before Trump could even say a word, and he was being bombarded with all these tweets. Even under its new leadership, the Democratic National Committee is clearly out of touch with the Democratic voters, many of whom are still feeling disenfranchised over all the fraud that stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders and gave it to Hillary Clinton. And now, of course, we're hearing that Bernie Sanders is considering founding a new political party. And I would be willing to wager a rusty nickel that he's going to get a lot of current Democrats to come on over to his new party. Because the Democratic rank and file are just absolutely disgusted with what the Democratic leadership did over this last year. Now, turning over to the Oscars, Donald Trump came out with a comment. He did an interview with Breitbart News, and he said, you need to remember, this year's Academy Awards had the second lowest ratings of all time. Not as many people tuned in as Hollywood would like to get their awards and self-congratulation. And Trump basically said the Oscars sucked because Hollywood's obsessed on politics, and they spent so much time attacking the president, they forgot to put on a good show. And, yeah, it did seem like the Oscars were basically hand out a statue, attack Trump, hand out a statue, attack Trump, hand out a statue, and attack Trump. Now then, a little bit of a footnote on that whole story. Price Waterhouse has had the contract for tallying and presenting the results of the Academy voting. Since time immemorial, they've just been fired. There'll be a new group in there next year after that huge embarrassment over Best Picture. And apparently photos being taken backstage at the Academy Awards were showing the guy who was supposed to be handing out the envelopes. He's got multiple envelopes. He's just playing around with them, juggling with his phone. He's gawking at Emma Stone. He just really wasn't paying attention. And because of that, Price Waterhouse has lost a very prestigious client. Now, the other day, apparently somebody wrote some graffiti featuring a swastika and the words "Hail the KKK," which was a dead giveaway it might be a hoax because there really isn't that much of a link here. And, of course, immediately this was all blamed on Donald Trump by Sarah Silverman and Sean King. Oh, it's Trump's policies that are leading this. He's encouraging all of this stuff. And once again, they're going to have to scrape the egg off of their face because it turned out the graffiti was the work of a non-white special needs student who just wanted a little bit of attention. You know, if a cat goes missing in this country, they're going to say Trump ate it. That's how bad it is out here. Now, a story coming out of 12160 really kind of paints a very good picture of what's going on. DNC death throes, caustic vitriol, tantrums, and calling the Navy SEAL's grieving widow an idiot doesn't seem to be working. What is amazing is that anybody thought that that was going to actually work in the Democrats' favor. Michael Moore. It's backfired on them horribly. They're so caught up in their fantasy liberalologist church, they are out of touch with their own voters, they're out of touch with the American people. They're just completely disconnected and living in their fantasy land here. Bill O'Reilly came on out today and said he'd never seen an ideology collapse like the Democratic Party today. Well, a big reason for that is the Democrats really didn't have an ideology. They were opportunists. They were exploiters. They were manipulators. I mean, even John Podesta said Hillary Clinton didn't really have an ideology. She just wanted to be the first woman president. I think the time has come for the Democratic leadership to stop being angry at Donald Trump because he is not Hillary Clinton. And it's time for them to start being angry at Hillary Clinton for being Hillary Clinton. Because that was the problem all along. Her long history of corruption and crimes and the fact that she's just not likable. She comes across like the crazy old aunt you deliberately go out of your way to avoid having to talk to at the family reunions. I wouldn't want to talk to her. I wouldn't want to meet her. Wouldn't want to be anywhere near her. Trump, yeah, I'll shake his hands. Obama, yeah, I'll give him a fist bump, even though he never returned Christmas cards that I sent to the White House. Hillary, no, absolutely not. And by the way, the signs Hillary for mayor are starting to pop up around New York City. Like a bad rash. It never really goes away. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
If I had an opportunity to fist bump Obama, I don't think I'd bump his fist. Hillary, I'm living this, Mike. My spouse, my girl, she canvassed for Obama, and she came to me and apologized for me for voting for Nader. She literally came to me after his first 4 years and said, "I'm sorry I called you an idiot." And she got it. And she's a total liberal Democrat. She works for the government. Now, I wanted to comment on a couple things from yesterday's show. One is the gentleman that was seeking out fellow Rivero Rangers. I think it's a great idea for us to start networking. In fact, I made a comment about that maybe a week or so ago. The other thing I wanted to comment is we had a helicopter equipped with a sniffer flying over San Francisco in a grid pattern. And it was quite obvious that they were looking for a nuke or a dirty bomb, but in the mainstream media, they were just saying, "Oh, it's a standard, NOAA or some other government agency." And as soon as the press was saying not to worry about it, that it was a red flag.
I hate to. First of all, we're going to have to take a break for a commercial, but don't hang up. I'm going to put you on hold because I do want to respond to what you just said. Okay? So we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Brendan in San Francisco. And Brendan, regarding the helicopter gridding over the city, there are all kinds of possible and benign explanations for that. I don't think we should be jumping to conclusion they're searching for a nuclear warhead. We know that the FBI is conducting experiments with monitoring cell phones and Wi-Fi's from the air instead of from the ground level. And even if that helicopter was equipped to be measuring radiation, as I mentioned the other day, the Nuclear Emergency Search Team has to maintain baseline maps of known explained radioactive sources in every major city. Now, from a helicopter, the only thing that you can detect are gamma rays and neutrons. The alpha particles aren't going to reach there, the beta particles aren't going to reach there, and they may just simply be updating the map for San Francisco. I don't think we should just assume that they're looking for a nuclear weapon based on that one piece of information.
In response to that, Mike, and it's not why I called, but this thing was literally skimming the rooftops of the city, and they had to go public and say, don't be alarmed. This was in 2012, and I know that some nukes went missing in Colorado somewhere, but the reason I called was I wanted to comment on Le Pen and her predicament, and I think Trump needs to come out and show strong public support for her.
Yes.
And I had 2-3 other points. I think Trump needs to go up to a college level in speaking to us. I think that we have the numbers and people are awake, and for him to use this kind of grade school manner, I think he needs to be more specific and encourage Americans to do their homework and find the truth, because he cannot keep playing games with the Democrats. These guys are playing like Mortal Kombat with Trump, and I think they're ramping this thing up, knowing that they're like cornered rats, and there's nothing more dangerous than a Democrat that's cornered. I mean, and like I said, we have the numbers, we have the truth, and it's like we've got to bring it home, man. And like I said, networking with Rivero's Rangers, I'm on a little peninsula here in San Francisco, and I'm surrounded by brain-dead hipsters that are paying $1,800 a month for a closet. I mean, I don't know what the heck their future goals are. There was an article, a guy's making $150 grand at Twitter, and he's broke.
Yeah.
So, I think Trump needs to speak the hard truth and on a weekly basis. As Eric Holder said, the gun grabber, we need to be repetitive and brainwash people. That enemy of the state gets it. You have to just be repetitive, and Trump needs to up his game a bit. I think we're playing too much defense, and we have the numbers.
I agree with you on that one. I agree with you on that one. Trump needs to break out. I mean, he's basically dealing with all the alligators in the swamp that he wants to drain. And by the way, we're just now getting word that Attorney General Sessions has recused himself from the investigations into whether or not Russia tried to influence our elections. So the Democrats have scored a victory on that. And, yeah, real quick, because we're almost to the commercial break.
Last comment. I think that, oh, my goodness. Well, I lost it, Mike. I wanted to just get it in there quickly. Thanks again. I'll let you go.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And we're going to start with Mo in Florida. I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me all right?
I hear you.
Yeah, Michael, just real quick, or if you can hold me over, I'd appreciate it. You know, that last caller was right on the money. I think he was shaken. I just heard that news, too, from you. Whatever, you know, what happens with Sessions. But my question was on this VX nerve gas with Kim Jong-nam, whatever he was.
Yes.
They sprayed it on his face. Did a little research on that, and, you know, the size of a head of a pin of that can kill somebody. And my question is, you know, if Trump goes around shaking hands with, I know he's a germaphobe, but he does it because he loves, you know, he likes people. And how easy would that be for somebody to put that, you know, shake his hand? It kind of blows me away.
Well, it would have to be somebody who's willing to commit suicide, because obviously if it's on their hand, it's going to be on his. In fact, a lot of people are wondering why the people who attacked Kim Jong-nam themselves did not die, because VX is very indiscriminate in its killing. The big question is, was this done to make it look like North Korea has VX nerve gas? We're going to hold you over the commercial break. We'll be right back. We're going to take a few more phone calls, then we're going to close the lines because I got a lot of news to get through today. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Mo in Florida. And Mo, just sort of pick it up where you left off.
Yeah, I was just saying that VX nerve gas is one thing. You could put it on your hand and with a barrier, so it didn't penetrate your skin, but it would penetrate.
That's getting a little James Bond, I think, and plus you need to understand that substances like VX, they do give off effluents, they evaporate, and the president is surrounded not just by metal detectors and scanners and X-ray machines, but machines that are actually sensing the air for any of the chemical signatures of dangerous chemicals or biological toxins.
But that's the VX is tasteless and odorless, and I don't think they can detect it. But you could be. I mean, I'm not an expert on that. But you remember what happened to Bob Marley with the shoe, the CIA, the tennis shoes the CIA gave him, the little with the cancer he got.
Yep. No,
yeah, there's a lot of things.
There's a threat out there. I mean, the CIA has spent a huge amount of our money figuring out all kinds of ways to kill us all off and leave no trace.
Yeah, I agree. It just blows me away that I guess he has to do it because otherwise he would. I don't know why.
He can't be seen as being afraid. Everybody will call the media. Say, "Oh, he's paranoid. He won't touch anybody." And I'm sure he's got lots of the hand sanitizers and everything around. Anyway, Mo, going to let you go. Going to switch over to Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha, Bob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Did we lose?
Hi, Mike.
There you are.
Hi, Mike. Before I get to my main topic, I just wanted to add, we've been talking about the mysterious deaths of these Russian officials and the plane crash of the choir.
Yes.
I would like to also add the plane crash of the Russian plane that crashed in the Sinai Desert right after Russia's entry into the war in Syria.
Yes.
A bomb was mysteriously loaded on that plane, and that killed, I don't know if it was 150 or 200 Russian civilians. So I'd like to add that tragedy as well to this ever-growing list.
Well, you need to remember that interim CIA director actually went out public and said, we're going to start killing Russians to make them pay for getting in the way of our New World Order.
Right, Morrell on the Charlie Rose show.
Yeah.
He was basically bragging about it. Mike, for the life of me, I don't understand how these officials, Flynn being first and now Sessions, why they don't divulge all the information. I mean, you said he may have forgotten these conversations he had. Well, if they were harmless conversations, if he didn't forget them, I don't know why he didn't reveal it. I mean,
well, you see, the reason is
the confirmation.
The Democrats, and again, Sessions was probably saying what he thought Congress wanted to hear in order to be confirmed, and that may have been a tactical mistake on his part. But again, the Democrats are not asking what was actually discussed. They're trying to make the crime out of the fact that he met the Russian ambassador while serving as a U.S. senator, and they're trying to make a big deal out of it. But as far as I'm concerned, until we know what was actually being discussed, for all we know, it could have been something about U.S. government business, because that's what the Russian ambassador is there at the UN for, is to basically try and present Russia's interests, and he's going to be talking to people. That's the job of an ambassador. Go on out, shake hands, talk to people about the issues. And as far as I'm concerned, until somebody proves to me that Sessions and the ambassador actually talked about the campaign and some kind of material support was discussed, then it becomes a violation of the Logan Act. But for all we know, they were talking about Obama's golf game and whether it was going to improve or not after Obama stepped down. So, we're basically seeing a government at war with itself, and in the process of this war with itself, it's airing all the dirty laundries getting on out there and being seen by the American people. And this, too, is something that we saw happening in the Soviet Union in the months before it all fell apart over there.
Yeah, but in this environment, you have to get all the information out because, I mean, Sessions and others who work for Trump, they have to consider, I mean, the media is out to get these people.
Yes.
And not only the media, but the media is being assisted by the intelligence services. So, I mean, they have to realize that, I mean, this could have been predicted right after Trump's speech, how it was received. It was a great speech. You had to think, something's going to happen. Another story is going to come out to divert the public's attention to something involving Russia, the evil Russians. And they've done it again. And now all of a sudden the spotlight, the attention is gone from the Trump speech to now this, to Russia, which is where the deep state, the shadow government wants it to be.
Yeah, and we know there's a lot of people who still want a war, either cold or hot, with Russia. They want a war with China because right now our economy is totally propped up only by forcing the rest of the world to use the U.S. dollar for cross-border trade and banking and charging them interest on that. Without that, we don't have anything else to prop up this country. Our manufacturing has been in decline. We make overpriced pieces of junk now. I remember when I was a kid, made in Japan signaled cheap junk. Today it's made in America, and it's overpriced junk. And nobody wants our GMO agriculture, and it's not like we could throw a switch and go right on back to healthy, organic, natural produce. It's going to take at least 3 years to try and find a way out of this GMO mess, and that's the corner that the U.S. finds itself in. Plus, of course, we have all of those people who were involved with the CIA's drug running over the years, the Bushes, the Clintons. Certainly Obama may not have been involved, but he turned a blind eye to it. And they're all afraid of a Trump presidency and a Sessions Department of Justice that's going to actually start prosecuting people for some of the crimes they've been committing. And that's why there's this firestorm around Donald Trump. And that other article we talked about earlier is absolutely right. They could wind up bringing down the entire country the way the Soviet Union collapsed.
Yeah, I mean, and especially with this corporate media, you mentioned the Obama potential crime that he committed with the money diverted from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Nothing's going to happen to Obama. He's not going to go to jail. I mean, you've got a corporate media reporting about all the problems that exist in this country. You've got a corporate media reporting that Kellyanne Conway had her shoes on the couch in the Oval Office. That's how bad they've gotten.
Yes, and that's why nobody's paying attention anymore. I mean, CNN's ratings have bottomed out. They're literally hiring companies to generate artificial Twitter followers and artificial clicks on their websites so they can keep on looting their own advertisers for more money.
Yeah. Mike, finally, I heard your interview with Richie Allen, and I really loved listening to the interaction between you two. Richie Allen, I like him, but he got it out for Trump, and I'm glad you gave it to him. Because you said this conversation is mutating into an anti-Trump screed by Richie Allen. But I didn't realize you were an actor. You mentioned this movie Alligator. I'm trying to locate it.
No. Actually, when in my early days in Hollywood, first of all, I actually, when my family moved from New England to Southern California, I was very briefly a child actor in commercials. And then later on, when I was just getting my visual effects career going, I would fill in the blank spaces by doing extras work. And, I don't even remember all the movies I actually appeared in. But it was, the funny part about Alligator was I had a dual role in it, because I had worked on the actual mechanical alligator, and then after I was let go from that, I got hired to play a doctor in the film. The only other time that ever happened was with a movie called Brain Scan, where I was the on-set visual effects supervisor, and I got drafted into being a stunt hand when the star of the film, Eddie Furlong, decided to take a recess away from the soundstage with his studio tutor. And we held an audition on the set. Whose hands looked most like a teenager's, and once they were shaved, I won. So that's my hand pushing into the face of the monster.
Yeah, I mean, what an interesting life that you've lived. I mean, if I was a literary agent, I would want to see that life written down in book form. Maybe have it titled "What Really Happened."
I seriously doubt that.
But honestly, I'd love to see that book. I would buy it. I would buy it for sure, and I think a lot of your fans would as well.
That is a long, long way off. We've got some more pressing things like stopping this rush to war and getting the economy back on track and all these other things. And, I like to tell anecdotes about unique things that have happened in my life, but I'm really not feeling like I want to impose the totality of it on anybody at this point. And,
okay, we'll wait another 20 years.
Okay,
right.
that'll be fine.
Okay,
it'll be a
Mike.
very short book. Actually, it's going to be a pamphlet. Let's see.
Okay.
Thanks an awful lot. I think Robert in London is our next caller. Robert, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, hi. Hello, hi. This is Robert here.
Yes, Robert.
I was hoping I could talk about two items, perhaps. One is global warming, or not global warming, but a subject around it. You did mention in the 1700s about the sun having no sunspots.
The Maunder minimum.
Yes. And I was watching a program some 30, 40 years ago, a Horizon program on BBC, and that was the subject. And the man wanted to prove that there was that the sun had gone through a cold spot, and so he took the tree rings and put them in the the carbon-14 dating machine, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no carbon-14 dating. Either the machine wasn't working or the sample was extremely old. But no, this is a sample from the 1700s that has received hardly any carbon-14 dating radiation. And what he just proved was he blew away the carbon-14 dating mechanism for dating all our archaeological samples that we pick up.
Well, hang on a second. One failure of the carbon-14 test does not discredit the entire methodology because it has been so successful in the past. But carbon-14 is only useful relatively recent in history. If you're going back to older times, there are other methods that you can use.
Sure, I understand. But the point is that what he shows that a sample of 1700 was a failure to predict the date, as it were. So my question is that you can know assuming that a sample has been alive for a while, it's received radiation, of which is then depleting that radiation over the time period which you measure.
Yes.
The question is, how do you know how much radiation that sample has received?
Okay. Well, I'm afraid you don't really. I'm afraid you don't understand the carbon-14 test because it has nothing to do with how much radiation you're receiving either from the sun or anywhere else. It's that carbon that is in the environment has a certain ratio of carbon-14 in there that's absorbed into your body, and it's constantly being updated. What happens is once an organism dies and is buried, the carbon-14 starts to decay naturally. It's a completely internal process. It's unaffected by anything outside. And as the ratio of carbon-14 to the rest of the carbon shrinks, it gives you that indication of how much time has passed since whatever it is was actually live. Carbon-14 only works on organic materials from living things. It can't be used to date pottery or statues or anything like that unless you can isolate an organic component of that. But it sounds to me like he's simply dealing with a laboratory error and not much else, because there's a huge body of successful carbon-14 dating, and this one individual instance where he failed to get a result, I don't think can be justified in saying carbon-14 dating doesn't work. I would be interested in how many times he repeated the test in order to verify whether or not it was his equipment that was broken down. For all we know, his radiation detector had lost the partial vacuum that's inside. Those are very sensitive pieces of equipment. Okay. Anyway, let's see. We're going to let you go here because we're coming up on a commercial, and we're going to go to Fred in Texas. And Fred, you're going to be our last phone call for a while because I got a bunch of news to get to. What's on your mind?
Well, I was listening a while ago, and the gentleman from San Francisco reported that he had seen a helicopter that was flying low over San Francisco, doing some kind of observation surveillance. And he had suggested that possibly that they were sniffing for radioactivity, but I stay in South Texas close to the Corpus Christi Naval Air Station pretty regularly, and about a month and a half or 2 months ago, I saw it looked like an Ares series airborne reconnaissance intelligence integrated electronic system flying in a grid pattern for several days in a row, carrying what looked to me as a advanced targeting pod underneath it. And I was really curious about it, so I did some research and I looked at it, and probably about a week after that, I saw a Bell helicopter. It looked like a 400 series Bell helicopter toting the same kind of pod under it, except it was lower and it was closer. And it seems to me that the military may be wanting to do some advanced targeting for locations in our country.
Well, they could be testing a system, and they test, here at home. Prior to the accidental shoot-down of TWA 800, pilots had been complaining because the Aegis Development Laboratory in New Jersey was constantly painting them with the search and targeting radars. And it made the flight crews on these aircraft very uncomfortable. But the government will test things on ordinary people in ordinary cities. It sounds to me like something is being tested and developed, and that's a rather benign situation. The caller from San Francisco made the leap that they were searching for a nuclear weapon, and that's not supportable on the basis of what he observed.
No,
Okay?
that's what I was going to comment. But it is notable, though, that he observed the same kind of thing that was happening where I saw also. And, who knows with the kind of data that we have the capability of processing nowadays. They could
but there are benign reasons for these things to be up there. And I'll give you a good example. There's a helicopter is always flying all over Oahu, and it's got this arm and pod out in front, and it's resulted in phone calls to the police. And it actually happens to be an aerial motion picture camera system that is here in the island, and it's used for, we used it on Lost, we used it on Hawaii 5-0, and it's in the sky, and it looks weird, but it's got every right to be there. Anyway, got to let you go, got to take a break for commercials. Back with news after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And let me send a message to our control room. We're trying to deal with some technical issues here between constantly changing software and hardware wearing out, especially here in Hawaii. It's like all of this stuff was made out of compressed rust at some point. All right, we're going to get back to the news here. We're going to close the phone lines for a while because we really have got a lot of stuff that we need to talk about, and I apologize to those of you who want to call on in. But I seriously doubt we'll get back to any more phone calls for the rest of today's show here. Now then, Paul Joseph Watson is out there with a comment on what's going on with Marine Le Pen. And we talked about this yesterday, where Marine Le Pen, as a member of the European Parliament, has parliamentary immunity. And in order to make the point about the horrors of the wars going on in the Middle East, she had posted some of the photos of people being killed by ISIS, which under French law, it's actually illegal to do that. France has turned into a real dictatorship. They have almost no freedom of speech left over there. They can't talk about the immigrants. They can't talk about any of that stuff. So apparently, with Marine Le Pen looking to win the French election and being a Eurosceptic and already talking about taking France out of the European Union, the European Union is basically trying to set her up so that she can just be arrested and taken out of the campaign that way. And that's a tactic that we used to see in Stalin's Russia. We've seen it in China. We saw it in Cambodia under Pol Pot. It's real skullduggery. Now, over in the Netherlands, they're coming up on their elections very, very soon, later this month here. And already their equivalent of the corporate media is out there saying, Geert Wilders can't possibly win. He's a Eurosceptic, and the Dutch people want out of the European Union, but really it's going to be a tight contest, and voters are more concerned with domestic issues than with the EU and migration, which is, of course, complete nonsense. And frankly, he's sounding like all of the American corporate media who were assuring us all last autumn that Hillary Clinton was going to win in a landslide. Now, story coming out of Ohio, ever since the recount sparked concerns over election fraud. They've been running their own investigation, and they have confirmed yet again illegal immigrants were registered to vote in Ohio and did vote in Ohio. So it's another confirmation, and it's rather amazing to see our political establishment and the corporate media just totally obsessed with Russia hacking our election and absolutely refusing to talk about all the obvious election fraud that took place. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And let me give you a little timeline about this whole vote rigging story that's been going along. Remember back in October of last year when Donald Trump said he was concerned that there might be election fraud going on, and then President Barack Obama got on TV and said, it is impossible to rig the U.S. elections. It's too spread out. It's too protected. It's everybody's watching, which all, of course, is a complete lie. Go over to blackboxvoting.org, and you can see how much fraud there is, or see that wonderful HBO documentary, Hacking Democracy, which shows how much election fraud is going on in this country, and including some of the ways that it's being done. And it focuses on Bev Harris, who's just done this amazing, amazing job calling attention to this problem. But last October, the president said it's impossible to rig the U.S. elections. Then, of course, we got into November, after the election was over, and Jill Stein is out there, we demand a recount because the election was rigged. And then the recount falls apart, and we get into December, and Hillary Clinton's out there saying, Russia rigged the election, Russia rigged the election, Russia rigged the election. Then Donald Trump gets into the White House, and he starts talking about having an investigation into election fraud in the whole system, and we get the NAACP out there saying, don't you dare investigate if the election was rigged. You're being racist to suggest that blacks and everything were involved in crooked elections. So you can see what's going on. Yes, our elections are fraudulent. And yes, we know who's really doing it, and it is not Russia. All the election rigging we have discovered so far favored Hillary Clinton, which undermines the very idea that Russia was somehow tampering with the election to favor Donald Trump, doesn't it? Little common sense here, people. There is evidence of election fraud all over this country. None of it traces back to Russia. Now then, let's turn over to the war zones. Emphasis on the plural. Things are getting really interesting. The Syrian army has now liberated the city of Palmyra, aided by the Russian Air Force. And it's a huge, huge victory. Palmyra was a key point for the for control of northern Syria, and now it's back in Syrian hands. And amazingly enough, the Kurds in northern Syria are now ceding some of the territory they're occupying to Assad to create a security buffer zone. And this is why the U.S. government is desperate to get boots on the ground, because this thing is almost over and will represent the biggest U.S. military defeat since Vietnam. And that's why they're out there saying, the Russians are bombing the good guys, we've got to get in there, we've got to save them. And nobody's listening to them, because we've heard it all before. Saddam has nuclear weapons. Assad has sarin gas. How many times do you have to be lied to before you understand we live under a government that controls us all with lies, fraud, and deception, aided and abetted by the corporate media? That's the reality. Might as well get used to it. Now, apparently there were some explosions in Serbia, and immediately NATO steps on in and says, oh, we're really sorry about the explosions in your country that killed at least one person. Why don't you come on and join NATO now? That would be very helpful. We'll take care of you and protect you. NATO is the growing imperialist aggressor, and primarily on behalf of the United States of America. Now, over in Ukraine, as you know, there is this blockade that's going on regarding coal coming from Donbass into Ukraine. It's turned violent. Now evidence is beginning to surface, according to this article over in shtfplan.com, that apparently a George Soros-backed group is behind organizing this blockade and exposing the possibility that Soros wants to grab all those natural resources and minerals in Ukraine, take them over. Soros is proving to be a supervillain on the scale of the worst you ever saw in the James Bond movies. Makes Blofeld look like a choir boy in comparison here. Now, apparently there is talk about boots on the ground in North Korea. Use of military force. They want to get on in there and put a pro-U.S. government in there, because now that China is refusing to buy coal from North Korea is in serious economic shape. They could collapse very quickly, and then the people of North Korea would choose a new government for themselves, and that just must not be allowed to happen. By golly, we'll give them a government we like, because that's what we've been doing. Now, up in Canada, somebody did a survey, and they discovered some rather interesting numbers that Trudeau is not going to be very happy about. 80% of Canadians back the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. They see it as reasonable. We're going to take a short break to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're talking about this poll that just came out in Canada. 80% of Canadians back the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. And more than half of Canadians oppose the Parliament's condemnation of the BDS campaign. And 2/3 would support Canadian government sanctions on Israel. Of course, Justin Trudeau doesn't care what the Canadians think. He knows who his real boss is. Just like American politicians know who the real boss is. And apparently House and Senate Republicans are introducing legislation that is going to cut off U.S. aid to the Palestinian Authority under certain conditions. And one of the conditions is the Palestinian Authority basically paying funds to surviving family members of people who are declared to be terrorists by Israel and executed. And of course, the issue here is they're willing to go on Israel's say-so that this person who got gunned down in the street by the Israeli forces was a terrorist. And how dare you care for their family? Amazing. All right, let's talk about the media war, which I think future history books are going to really spend a lot of time on this. The war between the paid professional liars and the American people who want the truth. Story coming out of shtfplan.com. Again, the mainstream are circling the wagons. They're coming for all of us. This is an orchestrated attack against truth, and yes, it is. Because as I mentioned many times before, corporate media makes the money that they make not to tell you the truth, not to tell you the facts you need to know to make good decisions. They are paid the huge sums of money. They are paid to be very convincing liars, to sell you things. And I don't mean just the commercials selling you cars and fast food and this year's fashion, selling you a new policy, selling you a new tax, selling you a new candidate. And they failed miserably last year selling you Hillary Clinton. And that was a major watershed moment. And they can't change their business model. They start telling the truth, the big paychecks go away. So all they can do is follow that old slogan, if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. I think probably the nadir is the New York Slimes that literally came out with an op-ed saying that the Internet threatens democracy. Now, from their point of view, democracy is this carefully crafted illusion of democracy, shielding an oligarchy, a fascist economic dictatorship from we the American people. That's what they mean by democracy. They don't mean a real democracy. They're talking about democracy, the brand, on the current system. And now they're declaring that the Internet is a threat to democracy. No, it's a threat to the established order. It's a threat to the corruption. It's a threat to the corporate media's lock on the minds of America. And so they're out there leading the charge. They want the Internet to go away. They want it to be controlled and basically turned into nothing but broadcast media's channels into your computers. I'm expecting at some point in the very near future that creators of websites are going to be required to apply for a license, subject to government approval, just like, you know, you get an FCC license to operate a transmitter. So let's go over to the economic news. There's been an upsurge in the bond market, and analysts are looking at it and saying that this might signal the end of this amazing stock market rally. Now, we know the rally is an artificial construct. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is way, way, way up there, but the earnings reports of all the companies that are in that little basket from which the Dow Jones calculates their industrial average, the earnings reports are poor. The orders for goods from those companies are down. There is a very obvious disconnect between the actual earnings and worth of those stocks and the prices of them. It's obviously being manipulated. And they can't keep doing that forever, although they have certainly been doing it for year after year after year after year. Now, there's been another leak out of the White House again. And according to this leak, Donald Trump is proposing to ignore World Trade Organization rules that violate U.S. sovereignty. Now, I think this would be a really good idea because the World Trade Organization is part of that globalist New World Order infrastructure to try and level the economies out between all the countries so that there isn't a panic rushing for the border when the borders come down. Remember, before the New World Order can make international borders go away, which is their dream, everybody has to be driven down to the same level of poverty as everybody else to keep them exactly where they are when the borders come down. And that's a big part of what the World Trade Organization's been doing. So if Trump is thinking about doing this, I'm fully on board. I'm fully on board. And of course, the World Trade Organization will say, we're going to sanction you, we're going to do this, but they've overplayed the sanctions. And they're really not working. Anytime somebody says, I sanction you, the sanctioned country says, all right, I'm not going to do business with you anymore. There's plenty of other countries around the world that will do business with us. You sanction us, we'll work to become more self-sufficient internally. Which is a threat to the globalists. The globalists wanted a planet Earth where all the food production was over here, and all the textile work was over here, and all the machine tools were being made here, and all the computers and electronics being made here, in order to keep us dependent on the rest of the world for our standard of living. And that's a big part of what the World Trade Organization enforces. The partitioning of commerce into regions, where this is the breadbasket of planet Earth. These are the people making the cars for planet Earth. And all the sanctions are doing is leading to countries like Russia saying, we're going to do it all inside our own borders for ourselves. And it's working for them. Now, despite Donald Trump's inspirational speech the other day, the economic realities are not good. We're coming up on a big fight over the debt ceiling. Congress is saying they're not going to raise the debt ceiling. And if they refuse to raise the debt ceiling, then Donald Trump is going to have absolutely no money to work with for his infrastructure projects and various other things that he wants to do to bring the jobs back to the American people. Because Congress isn't thinking about what's good for you. Congress is thinking about what's good for the Congress. Now, if there is a deadlock there, even in a GOP-controlled House, there are a couple of different things that Trump can do. Trump, as the President of the United States, has the authority to order the Treasury Department to issue a new currency. Lincoln did it. John F. Kennedy did it. It may have been one of the major motives for their eventual assassinations, and I'm sure that Trump's people are well aware of that. But Trump could simply say, all right, if you're not going to let us borrow any more money from the Federal Reserve, we'll just go back to that old-fashioned model of making our own money. That would be the best thing that he could do. Second thing he could do is take government control of the private central bank, the Federal Reserve, the way Putin did in Russia. That worked out very well for the Russian people. If Congress provokes an economic crisis, there are all those accumulated FEMA orders other presidents, past presidents, have signed into existence that can be activated immediately when the current president declares there's a national emergency. And an economic crash is on the list of events that allow Donald Trump to invoke those orders, where he can do what he thinks is best for the nation and the economy, and Congress gets to basically go home and sit there wondering what the heck happened, trying to find somebody else to take the blame for mistakes that they've been making. But there is going to be a crisis coming up here later this month where the current debt ceiling is going to be hit. And again, all of this is because 100 years ago, a corrupt Congress and an equally corrupt president sold us all into the slavery of the exact same form of banking we fought the American Revolution to break free of. Everyone's always talking about, oh, slavery's bad. Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. Got a newsflash for you guys. You are all slaves. You, each and every one of you, is a slave to the Federal Reserve. That's what it's set up to do. Enslave you with a debt, a sense of a debt obligation. Over in Italy, they're starting to strain against the leash in Brussels. And former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi is saying Italy needs to bring back the lira and put it into circulation alongside the euro. They're not going to drop the euro yet, but people are looking at the euro and saying its days may be numbered. Let's have a safety net. Let's have a second currency in there. And there's no law anywhere that says you cannot have multiple forms of legal tender, multiple forms of mediums of exchange. Just like in this country today, we have cash currency and we have virtual currency. I think it's a good idea. I think all the European countries ought to start getting ready for the collapse of the euro. Now, we've been talking about the pensions crisis in the United States, and it is spreading all over. CalPERS is cutting pension benefits by 63% for workers in the East San Gabriel, California area, which is very close to where I used to live when I was a kid. And they're basically saying their former municipal employer failed to pay their pension dues. So while it might be nice to blame the 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud for this one, no, in this case, it was government failing to do their job and honor their obligations. And we'll just stick those poor old retirees with the problem. You know, they can't fight back against us. What are they going to do? Hit us with their walkers? But the reality is pension funds are going broke all across the nation. More bad news from the world of retail, because none of us have the money to go on down and buy what they're selling. Abercrombie & Fitch is going to close another 60 stores. Sales are continuing to slide. H.H. Gregg is going to close 88 stores in an attempt to stay afloat. A lot of these large clothing retailers were selling on the basis of fashion, having to have this year's colors, having to have this year's look. Well, that's something that can be sustained when people are able to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries. Now we're basically buying clothes that look like they're going to last as long as possible and wearing them until they start to fall off of us. And that, of course, is a death blow to these companies that could look forward to you buying endlessly new clothes to look trendy and fashionable and show off to your friends and neighbors. Another aspect is that we live in a society where the ostentatious display of wealth is becoming a negative. People are pulling back. I think that's a very, very good thing as well. 19 retailers on the brink. Sears, J. Crew, Claire's, Route 21, Payless, 9 West, Gymboree, Not Your Daughter Jeans, True Religion, Indra Holdings Corporation, Bon-Ton Department Stores, 267 stores there. Tom Shoes, David's Bridal, Tops, Velocity, Fairway, 99-cent only stores, Charming Charlie, and Evergreen Savers. Total, 13,000 stores are about to close. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And more bad news for Obamacare. Apparently, one of the largest long-term care insurers is about to shut down and liquidate. And this is a $4.6 billion insurer. It's the biggest Obamacare failure ever. And apparently, Penn Treaty Network of America Insurance basically has been, for all intents and purposes, running a pyramid scheme. And there's been 8 years of legal battles between the state regulators, investors, and policyholders. And finally, Pennsylvania Court Judge Hannah Levitt signed off on a plan to liquidate Penn Treaty Network American Insurance and its affiliate, American Network Insurance, the largest such health insurance liquidation in history. And this will leave insolvent insurers, their owners, and customers to pick up the cost for more than 70% of the up to $4.6 billion in projected long-term care claims expected for 76,000 aging Penn Treaty customers nationwide. Clearly, the current system is dysfunctional. It's very profitable. And in the end, that's all that matters. We're making money. That's all we need to worry about here. We don't care. University of California, as if they have not had enough bad news lately from some of the rioting and crime going on, at their San Francisco campus, 79 IT employees just got handed their pink slips this week. Many of them were forced to explain their jobs to H-1B visa replacements from an Indian outsourcing firm. I would like to see Donald Trump wade into that particular issue as well. Talking about immigration and globalism here, over in Hungary, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has announced that his nation will build a second barrier between Hungary and Serbia to keep out the migrants, saying ethnic homogeneity is vital to the economy. Because they're looking at what all these other European Union nations are dealing with this blended population of the indigenous people of those nations, with this influx of the refugees and all the problems it's causing. And it is economically harmful. Now, Germany, according to a document that's floating around over there, it's a working paper, they're talking about accelerating the deportations from the EU. And basically they're asking for the European Union to relax some of these declared human rights provisions so that asylum seekers who fail to be declared as true refugees can be sent home quickly. And one of the big scandals that is not being covered is the fact that the vast majority of these refugees pouring into Europe do not actually meet the legal definition of a refugee. They're going there because they think they're going to have better jobs or there's going to be all kinds of free stuff. And it's a huge, huge drain. Over in Sweden, which we are assured by the corporate media is perfectly safe and everybody gets along just fine, and the native Swedes and the refugees are swapping wet, sloppy kisses, well, apparently got a little bit out of control. A 34-year-old Somalian migrant has been arrested for literally raping a Swedish woman to death. And apparently he was still having at her corpse when the police showed up to get him. But of course, if you post a picture of that in France, you will go to jail. You're not allowed to do that sort of thing here. Apparently over in Germany, another refugee shelter had a bit of a kerfuffle. migrants armed with iron bars and knives were attacking the security workers. The security workers are supposed to be there to protect them, and the migrants apparently just went on a rampage against them. Now, one of the things Donald Trump was talking about in his speech was immigration reform, and he brought up the idea of a merit-based immigration system, and everybody's acting shocked. Oh, it's discriminatory. Yeah, it is, and it's the way immigration has been handled for most of the nation's history. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about immigration. We're talking specifically about President Trump calling for merit-based immigration reform, and of course the liberals just went ballistic on that, screaming it's discriminatory. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. And that's how immigration has been handled in this country all the way back to even before it was a country. Every nation has a right to control their borders to decide who does and does not come on into the country. Even during the heyday of mass European migration to the United States, Ellis Island, Statue of Liberty, give us your tired, your hungry, your poor, teeming masses yearning to breathe free. They still had to go through Ellis Island. They had to be checked out. They had to be, make sure there were no communicable diseases. If they were put into quarantine. Those with criminal records were sent back home. Those who had no marketable skills were sent back home. It's the way it has always worked. It's only ever since this globalist New World Order nonsense really started getting traction that they're trying to convince everybody that borders should be totally open. And you should welcome disease-bearing, welfare-seeking MS-13 gang members into your hearts and homes. There should be a merit-based immigration system. Those who are going to be a benefit to our society, welcome. Those who are going to cause problems, we can just as soon do without. Now, apparently up in Connecticut, their governor, Daniel Malloy, has told local police they do not have to abide by federal requests to detain undocumented immigrants. He's basically implying Connecticut is now a sanctuary state. And again, this puts the good governor in violation of Title VIII, harboring illegal immigrants. And even if he's not personally profiting from the illegal immigrants, he is still could be sent to prison for 5 years for each individual count. So, 5 years times the number of illegal immigrants being protected inside Connecticut, that's a very long jail sentence. We can solve the immigration problem. Let's just enforce the already existing laws. Now, down in Alabama, they've got a somewhat different approach. They're deporting illegals. They're arresting them at work and at home. There was a dreamer who was at a rally expressing her fear that she was going to be taken away, and she was. They got her coming on out of the building. Good for the people of Alabama here. Now then, using PolitiFact's own numbers, we can declare the claim that illegal immigrants are a benefit to our economy to be more fake news. Because using PolitiFact's own numbers, illegal immigrants cost the U.S. taxpayers $66 billion every single year. And as Donald Trump pointed out in his speech, when we allow illegal immigrants into the country and they obtain jobs, it means that one of the legal American citizens who's been out of work for months and years will not have that job. We have more than 90 million Americans. And I was very glad to see Trump use that number and not go along with this nonsense 5% unemployment rate we keep getting. We have 90 million legal American citizens willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs for months or years. And until every single American who wants a job has a job, we shouldn't be allowing anybody else to come into this country, into the job market. It's just common sense. But from the point of view of the Democrats, each new illegal immigrant is a potential Democratic voter. And again, Ohio confirmed. Illegals were registered to vote and did vote in this last election. The Hillary Clinton campaign was literally selling out the country to illegals trying to win the election. Now, contrary to Obama saying, you didn't do that, which is one of the more ridiculous things he said, the United States of America, even in the current infrastructure shambles that it is in, is the product of generation after generation of Americans who build, who put down roads, who lay pipes, who construct bridges. And each generation of Americans do all that work with the intention of leaving America a better place to bequeath to the next generation of Americans. This nation is the common heritage of every American who's ever lived here. And I include in that those who are legally allowed to come in here and be citizens or residents. Hillary Clinton's campaign wanted to barter our nation to the illegal immigrants in exchange for their votes. And it was never hers to give in the first place. Now, over in the European Union, as more and more indications of imminent collapse are heard, and Juncker is out there saying, I'm going to make a federal dictatorship to silence all you people. Apparently, EU leaders are now going to the Pope to try and find ways to revive the struggling bloc. They want the Pope to step on in and say, render unto Brussels that which is Brussels, or go straight to the dark regions. And by the way, your son is really cute. I'll bet he would love a personal tour of the Papal Palace. And by the way, if you hadn't picked up on it, religion is another system of controlling you. Always has been. That part about Romans 13 was added by the Romans following the Council of Nicaea. Now, over in Great Britain, Prime Minister Theresa May is basically saying she is sticking to the timetable. Article 50 is going to be triggered later this month. And she's defying this growing pushback by the Ramoners that there's going to be a rebellion against her over the issue of rights for EU citizens living in Great Britain. Now, as far as I can tell, that's actually a minor technicality, but they're seizing on anything they can do to try and delay and delay and delay and delay. Now, the EU itself is not helping matters very much because apparently one of the EU's latest demands to allow Britain to leave is EU access to 60% of British fishing waters after the Brexit. In other words, they're trying to go for Brexit light. Yes, you can say that you're not part of the European Union, but you still have to have the open borders, and the EU gets access to your resources. But you can call yourself independent, really. That makes you feel better. UKIP member of the European Parliament, Gerald Batten, is railing against Jean-Claude Juncker and his declared objective of creating a federated nation out of the European Union, saying it's just making things worse. And he's absolutely right, because the people of the European Union, first of all, they don't like being in the European Union. They don't like the hideous debt that yet another private central bank layered above them have imposed on them. The countries that have good economies are tired of being looted and plundered to pay the debts of countries that fell victim to banker manipulation, like Greece. And the people of Europe remember that the European Union was originally sold to them as nothing more than a free trade, free travel, common currency bloc. That was it. That was all it was supposed to be. And they have watched as Brussels has metastasized into this gigantic tyrannical tumor over their lives. Much as the United States was founded as a confederation of separate nation states, the states, only to see Washington, D.C. grow into this monstrous tyrannical tumor. But the EU can take heart that they managed to do in only a few years what the United States took 200 years to bring about. Now, a former Marine who was over at the VA saw an absolutely deplorable situation. Things are not better for our veterans over at the VA. And he basically posted some of the pictures he took on Facebook. And apparently it triggered huge pushback. Thousands of people are expressing outrage. And the head of the medical center said, well, we've removed an employee from patient care. So, problem solved, everybody go away. We all know that the problem isn't solved. We've been hearing about the absolutely deplorable treatment of our veterans by the VA. It goes all the way back to George W. Bush when they started this insane campaign of endless wars across the globe. And I remember Rumsfeld actually coming on out and saying they were just thrown by how many of the soldiers were surviving their battlefield injuries. They hadn't budgeted enough money for these many crippled and wounded veterans to be cared for. And I think probably most veterans who are having to deal with the VA are thinking that they put on the uniform, they took the oath, they did as they were ordered to do, and now that they're wounded and can't fight anymore, the government has just abandoned them. We've been hearing all these stories about how the VA is fudging its records to make it look like veterans are getting timely medical care, but the reality is they're just being put out there and left to die. Long, horrible, lingering deaths. It is a shame. It's a national disgrace. Regardless of whether you agree with these wars or not, and I most assuredly do not, we as a nation do owe a debt of honor to all those who put on that uniform and take that oath and obey their orders thinking that they're serving their country. And the fact that they were lied to and used only makes it obvious they're just as much victims as anybody else in these wars. We owe them the proper and appropriate care for their injuries. And apparently the government just isn't all that interested in doing that. They're going through the motions. They're spending their budget on artwork and going to conferences. And the ordinary veterans are just being marginalized. And again, you're not going to see much of this on the corporate media either. Now, do you remember back during the Obama administration and they talked about integration of the military, that women could serve right alongside the men, and there were some concerns expressed. Certainly in the non-mechanized military, the average woman is weaker than the average male and can carry less equipment. And there were also concerns expressed about moving women along too quickly for the sake of politics, such as the first female F-14 pilot who ramp-struck her aircraft and killed her Rio. And now it turns out the Navy has a problem with co-ed crews on their ships on long cruises. The women are getting pregnant. Apparently 16 out of 100 Navy women are reassigned from ships to shore duty due to pregnancy. This was data obtained in a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit by the Daily Caller News Foundation's investigative group. Now that's last year, 16 out of 100. That number's up 2% from 2015. And of course, this means that all the training for shipboard duty is wasted if they're reassigned to the shore. It's causing problems for the manpower. Combat readiness. It takes a long time to train a crew for one of those ships. I know I have a family member who went through Navy training, qualified weapons officer. Took her a long time to get that. And it didn't work out because the liberals like to fantasize about this ideal world and then pass laws and rules to try and bring it about, and then reality leaps up on them and it backfires, and all they can do is try and blame somebody else. And again, it goes back to the fundamental flaw in the liberal political philosophy that everybody is born with a totally blank mind, and everything that we think, feel, know, believe is the result of our environment. And that is the justification for the liberal agenda of controlling absolutely every aspect of our lives in order to re-engineer our minds. It has never worked. It is a horrendous failure because it's based on an intellectual fraud, Coming of Age in Samoa by Margaret Mead. And it's been exposed as a hoax, but the liberals still cling to it. They lionize Margaret Mead. They don't want to admit that the very foundation of their entire philosophy is fraudulent. It's easier convincing Scientologists they're wrong than to convince a liberal. That's why I'm starting to call them the Church of Liberalology. Oh, boy. Yeah, let's go ahead and take a few photos. Apparently, over in Baltimore, boy, this is like right out of the 1930s gangster era. 7 police officers have been arrested for racketeering, stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash and drugs, and then lying to cover up their tracks. Of course you're going to cover up your tracks. But apparently they were stealing money, property, and narcotics. They were stopping pedestrians in traffic, entering private property by pretending to have warrants or writing false affidavits to get warrants and then seizing property. Not all of it, in fact hardly any of it, was officially declared to be civil forfeiture. They just put it in their pockets. All right, let's see. Oh, do you know when you go to McDonald's and they went upscale and they got nice interiors and all the workers have got those uniforms? Do you know where those McDonald's workers' uniforms come from? They're made in U.S. slave labor camps, prison industries. That's where they're being made. And then McDonald's screams they can't afford to minimum wage for their workers. Greed is definitely not good. Not good at all. Alrighty, moving on down here. Over in Detroit, if you live in Detroit, you're under a boil water alert until at least tomorrow. They've had another problem with their water system there. We're going to take another break for commercials. When we come on back, we've got more news to talk about. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, this is a really bizarre story, and of course it's from California, because you know they're going crazy out there. Maybe it's all the fracking fluid in the drinking water or something. Apparently, there's this 22-year-old guy named Vinny O, who has spent $50,000 on over 100 procedures to transform himself into a genderless person. And look at a photo of the guy. He does look like he's from another world. He's had over 110 procedures to transform into a genderless being. And we're going to have to build another darn restroom out there. And we get the male and the female and the trans and the no gender and the space alien and the Loch Ness monster. It's ridiculous. All right, let's take a phone call. Joseph in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Over here, you know, the state of California, I think, is going through some very odd times in comparison to the rest of the country. You know, California...
Hello? Are you there? Okay, I think we just lost him. Yeah, we just lost him. Okay. Now, let's get on to human-caused global warming. As we mentioned yesterday, there was actually a blizzard warning up on the tops of the 2 main volcanoes on the Big Island, Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea. And we even posted a link to cameras at the observatory on Mauna Kea, and it was pretty intense up there. It's snowing in paradise. And they got about 8-10 inches of snow up there. And the National Weather Service actually issued a blizzard warning saying if you're traveling up to the top of those mountains, have a winter survival kit with you. Those are a little hard to come by here in Hawaii, but good advice nonetheless. My advice would be don't go up there unless you have to. Although there is a nice ski run up there. That's kind of the cool thing. You could ski in the morning and be surfing in the afternoon. Come to Hawaii. Our beaches are supposed to be black. And apparently they're looking at more snow coming into Vancouver. They're now saying they had a colder than usual January and February up there. Over in Europe, the snow is very good on the resorts. The French Alps are looking good. They got significant snowfall, which is going to be continuing through the weekend. And as a matter of fact, on the Alps and the Dolomites, they got 50 centimeters of fresh snow up there, and that's good for the ski resorts there. Remember way back in March of 2000, the banner headlines, snowfalls are now a thing of the past. Wrong. They had record snows blanketing Iceland. The Weather Channel is claiming spring is going to be arriving early, and then we get a hard freeze on the southeastern United States. The polar vortex is coming back in. We're not out of this one yet. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go ahead and take a call from Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing fine.
Mike, hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, good. Mike, I think that what we need to do is what Trump needs to do. He needs to start arresting some of these people now to doing the leaks. He needs to start with former CIA director, the Wahhabi convert there, Saudi Arabian agent Brennan. He needs to start arresting John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and of course Hillary. He needs to go after her. He needs to go after Obama. Start arresting them. These are the people, and there's more. These are the people that are not only undermining his campaign, but they're selling out this country. They're trying to bring this country down. They're globalists.
I don't know that they're trying to bring the country down because they all want to run the country and pillage it and loot it. But I think they're going to bring the country down if they keep on behaving like this.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're in cahoots with the rest of the globalists. And everything is, by the way, is connected. What you're seeing, what they're trying to do in France to Marine Le Pen. This stuff is all connected. People talk about Russia. Russia, I mean, we should be forming an alliance with Russia and look at the EU as an enemy. The EU is like the Soviet Union on steroids. At least the Soviet Union tried to do what they tried. I don't know if they did a very good job, but they for the most part, tried to work for their people, not to destroy not to purposely destroy Russia. The European Union is purposely trying to destroy Europe by flooding it with so-called immigrants.
Yes.
By basically bringing the whole place down, and it all goes hand in hand. And I think Trump has got to understand this, and he's got to start really. He's got to ramp it up. Now,
I agree. Right now, he's playing a defensive game, and as long as he stays defensive, they're going to rope-a-dope him. He does need to break out and get ahead of this thing, and he needs to act decisively against these White House leakers. And I'm almost picturing Donald Trump as not yet really in his heart of hearts believing he's the President of the United States. Now, he certainly came across as presidential in his speech before the Congress, but I think he needs to start exploring just what his authority is as the president. Now, we don't want a president who's acting outside the law, but we do want a president who's going to start holding the rest of the establishment to the letter of the law. And like I said, you could knock down a huge part of this immigration nonsense by just enforcing the laws we have right now.
Yeah, and one of the things, there's reasons what they're doing is attacking first Flynn and now Sessions. There's reasons behind it. Flynn knew where all the bodies were buried. He knew about the smuggling. He knows about the smuggling of arms to the terrorists in Syria and Libya. And he knows that what happened to Ukraine was wrong. That the George Soros people were behind it. And as far as Sessions goes, Sessions is, he knows we need to secure these borders, and he knows we need to get these illegal aliens out.
More than that, the issue with Sessions is Sessions would have no reservation about further investigation into Hillary's email server and whether she was selling secrets to foreign interests. in exchange for donations to her so-called
Right.
charitable foundation. And that has got everybody scared because, according to this anonymous FBI source, everybody at the upper levels of Washington, D.C. were using that Clinton Foundation as a tax shelter and money laundry. And, of course, anybody connected with that cocaine running back in Arkansas, that goes right to the CIA itself. And that's why they're all afraid. Because even if it's the CIA, they're not immune from the law that says you're going to go to jail if you're smuggling cocaine into this country.
Absolutely, and Brennan is one of the first ones that should go to jail. Now, as far as he also needs to investigate the Bushes. Now, as far as Sessions goes, he should just ignore this stuff. He shouldn't even have that press conference, and he shouldn't recuse himself from say campaign-related investigation. He shouldn't recuse himself from anything. He should just ignore these people and go and be like a pit bull and go after Hillary, go after Obama.
I agree. I agree. Trump needs to go on the offensive now and not just sit there and let people lob these smear tactics at him. Trump's got to go on the offensive, and he's got to start saying, we're going to reopen the investigation into the email server. We're going to reopen the investigation into the murder of Vince Foster. We're going to reopen the investigation into the pay for play and the Clinton Foundation. He's got to start getting
the gun
a little
smuggling.
And the gun running to the ISIS and Al Qaeda out of Hillary's State Department.
And let's not forget Fast and Furious before that, where Holder, who's big mouth, I see Holder's starting to get the, and what really gets me is a guy like Darrell Issa, whatever his name is, a congressman, California, Republican. He refused to put Holder in jail for contempt when Holder was held in contempt. He refused to put him in contempt. They never had a special prosecutor, and now this clown is actually asking for a special prosecutor with this not Russian nonsense, and that's all it is. It's total nonsense.
It is, but again, the double standards and hypocrisy are fully on display for the American people to see. And the polls are showing that the American people are just turned off by this. Certainly America's image around the world as some kind of a bastion of moral authority and human rights is being shoved into the Al-Qaeda. They're telegraphing, we're not the greatest nation on earth anymore. We haven't been for some time. We're operating like a third world banana plantation dictatorship. And like I said, I'm seeing so many parallels between the publicly perceivable behavior of our government right now at war with itself and what we were seeing in the Soviet Union just before it fell apart. And my gut is telling me that Donald Trump could very easily be the last president of the United States of America. That all of this infighting and factionalism is going to, in fact, bring the country down. And then we need to basically band together to take care of each other and set up a new government of our own choosing and not let the United Nations come on in and say, well, we're going to plunk these people over here and you will be happy. Because, no, we will not.
Because at the end of the Soviet Union, what Gorbachev should have done at the time, taken the offensive, not allow them the hardliners to take him prisoner, which they did for a short time. He should have made a move on them and said, look, this is it. You guys have had your day. You're done. This is the new Soviet Union. We're now going to have more freedom. We're going to have we're going to have, we may have still socialism, but we're not going to have out and out complete state ownership of everything. And that's what he should have done. He probably could have saved this country at that time.
Yeah, but those who were resistant to any kind of a change, those who were resistant to any kind of change to the status quo are what brought the Soviet Union down. And that's exactly what's going on here. We have an entrenched economic, political, media establishment that are resistant to any kind of change to the status quo, even though the status quo is simply not working any longer. They are going to destroy this country. And we know which way to point the finger. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go. I thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. I need to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And before we take any more phone calls, I do have a few more news stories I need to get through. When I saw this story appear yesterday, I thought it was somebody's idea of a joke, where Oprah Winfrey is considering a run for the White House in 2020. Because after all, if businessman Donald Trump could do it, then businesswoman Oprah Winfrey could do it. And I really did think it was a joke, but apparently it's real. And Matt Drudge is apparently out there saying, yeah, this is a good idea. It's going to be Trump versus Oprah in 2020. The Democrats have not learned anything from their mistakes this last year. A personality cell is not going to work. If the Democrats really want to have a chance to take the White House away from Donald Trump in 2020, they better start talking to Tulsi Gabbard. Because all Oprah is going to do is continue that same policy of pandering to the blacks and the minorities and the women and say, we're for you, that same politics of victimhood. And we're burned out on that nonsense. Now then. All right. Steve in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. President Trump was aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford today, and
yes.
he was, telling everybody, all the sailors, how great the ship was and all. Yet I remembered you criticizing that ship, its seaworthiness and all. And I was just wondering if you could go over that again.
Well, the Gerald R. Ford was a very daring experiment in building a ship with multiple new technologies, and it's not going very well. And apparently, Pentagon experts are saying it might not ever really be useful in actual combat, but it looks very impressive, and Donald Trump either may not be aware of the craft's shortcomings, or he may think that that's something that the general public is unaware of, and he's trying to build up pride in the military. But the Gerald R. Ford is just the latest in a long line of hideous embarrassments with these advanced weapon systems. And it's not confined to the United States of America. Apparently the Eurofighter program is having serious problems, way more expensive than planned, and the aircraft is not performing. And again, the military-industrial complex, they're not really interested in cost-effective weapons. They're interested in money, power, and authority. And Eisenhower did warn us about that. But as far as the Gerald R. Ford is concerned, apparently the magnetic catapults, the electromagnetic catapults that got away from steam, those have a high failure rate. When they are working, that sudden pulse at the beginning, instead of a ramp up as a steam valve is open, has apparently been actually cracking the front landing gear of aircraft that are supposed to be able to survive being catapulted. There are problems with its radar system. It's like the F-35. It's just a huge, long list of problems. And I think in many ways, overall, our technology has become decadent. There's too much technology for the sake of technology, such as the Internet of Things, which is a ridiculous idea, especially when you look at what happened with that plush toy. And I think we need to rededicate ourselves to the idea that technology where it's needed is a good thing, but if it's not needed, let's keep things simple so that they're going to work. And again, I don't need a computer in my coffee maker because they only last about 6 months anyway. I'm using a French coffee press. I've had that for years now, no problems. Nothing to plug in, certainly no updates.
Yes, that's what I'm worried about. The buildup that he talks about of the military. Why don't they just build these older styles?
Well, they all want the latest whiz-bang, and that's where the money is coming from. But, again, I disagree with Donald Trump giving the Pentagon another $50 billion until he gets down on them for all the trillions of dollars of lost money and waste that's been going on. And I'm very alarmed at everybody talking about war with potentially Russia and China when our latest weapon systems have very high failure rates, and even not the latest ones. Remember during Desert Storm, we were being told that the Patriot missile system was intercepting 90% of its targets. Then it came on out later that actually it was only about 50%, and then it came on out later that actually it wasn't working all that well, but we'll do better the next time, we promise you. Just give us more money, we'll get the thing working. I mean, look at Israel's Iron Dome. they're having to shoot 10 interceptors for every one incoming threat to have any chance of doing anything. All right, listen, we're going to take a phone call from Glenn in Philadelphia. Then we're going to close the lines again because I got to get back to doing the news. Glenn, what is on your mind
Hello,
today?
Mike. Hello,
Hi.
Mike. I called about discrimination, but actually, before I do, I wanted to harken back to one of your first hour callers with a suggested title for your autobiography. I think you could go with, instead of What Really Happened, you go with What the Hell Happened.
Yeah,
you know?
that would be a better one.
If you didn't want to do that, since you've been through so much, you might stick with something simple like My Struggle.
I'd have to trim the mustache for that one.
Okay, never mind. About discrimination, you know, the words are very. Our society is less and less literate all the time. The word discrimination, of course, isn't always negatively connoted. You see, like the discriminating buyer, the discriminating connoisseur, the discriminating foodie. You know, discrimination.
Yeah, it was a positive thing. It meant you were a person of taste and perception. On my shortwave radio, I've got a discriminator.
Right. We went around telling kids to make good choices. Well, that's what a discriminatory, someone with discrimination is. It's someone who makes good choices.
Yes.
So the issue would seem to be between justifiable discrimination and unjustifiable discrimination. So, and I think that's when somebody says that's discriminatory, it's like, yes, it is. We're making a conscious and deliberate choice not to bring murderers and rapists into and diseased people with leprosy and strange diseases into our country.
That's the way immigration has always worked in this country up until this New World Order nonsense. All right, Glenn, thanks a lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here, and we're going to close the phone lines again because I really do want to talk about some important issues before the end of today's show. Over in India, they are now boycotting Coca-Cola, and there may even be an outright ban of the company. India is now starting to show its muscle. They've kicked out Bill Gates and his foundation after the disaster with the oral polio vaccine, you know, where all these kids who got the polio vaccine came down with a mysterious polio-like paralysis illness, but trust us, it can't be polio. They had the vaccine. And so they got kicked out. And now, apparently, the Coca-Cola bottler in India has been discovered to have been draining the country's scarce water resources to make their product to the detriment of India's farmers. And so there's a general nationwide boycott against Coca-Cola because they need their water for their farms and for themselves to use. And we're seeing all over the world these giant corporations acting like the resources of the planet belong solely to them for their commercial advantage. We're seeing it in the United States where the CEO of Nestle literally said water is not a natural right for people. It should be commoditized to enrich a corporation someplace. Now, back during the Declaration of Independence, they discussed the inalienable rights of man as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They put pursuit of happiness in there because they needed to take out a right to property. But if you have an inalienable right to life, then with that comes an inalienable right to the necessities of life: food, air, water. Corporate greed is running rampant, and I'm glad to see the people in India pushing back. I really am. Now, as you know, there is a big fight going on between the Trump administration and Attorney General Sessions regarding marijuana decriminalization in various states. And Sessions is out there saying they want to shut down all recreational marijuana abuse. They're not going to touch the medical marijuana patients, but they're going to shut down the recreational use here. And over at Charles Hugh Smith Blogspot, he penned a letter. Dear President Trump, if you want to lower healthcare costs and stem the opiate death spiral, legalize marijuana. And they're making some very, very good point. But we know that the push against marijuana is coming from the alcohol lobby, the tobacco lobby, and Big Pharma, because Big Pharma is literally wanting to get Americans hooked on their legal opium products to make them dependent customers for life. That's actually come on out. In fact, apparently one pharmaceutical company actually got charged with conspiring with doctors to deliberately addict patients to their legal opium. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, we're talking about the big pharmaceutical corporations' desire that you be a constant, continuing customer of their product for the rest of your life. And this has led to the pharmaceutical corporations encouraging doctors to start prescribing opiates to their patients. Get them hooked. Get them dependent. And it has gotten to be so bad that prescription opioid deaths now surpass gun-related deaths. The big pharmaceutical corporations are killing more people than guns. But they're corporations. They're good. We never question anything a corporation does. Some kind of a heretic? What's wrong with you people? Now, not too long ago, we pointed out there had been a study done over at Yale that had confirmed once again that vaccines are causing ill effects on the neurological system. Guillain-Barré syndrome, autism, ADHD, and other issues. And this study from Pennsylvania State and Yale University shows there's an association between inoculation and the onset of disorders such as anorexia nervosa, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and anxiety disorders. They're messing around with the brains with this stuff. And, of course, the big pharmaceutical industry is already on the warpath against this study, just like they were on the warpath against that French study that showed that rats fed GMO corn and glyphosate developed monstrous tumors, starting just 1 month after Monsanto ended their own rat trials to declare the products perfectly safe here. So, with that as our background, we have another story coming out of Natural News today, pointing out that mercury in vaccines may be as much as 50 times more toxic to the brain than mercury in fish. Remember a while back there was this big thing about, oh, we're finding mercury accumulating in tuna, and oh, it was a terrible thing. And some tuna companies lost a lot of business. Some gained by promising mercury-free tuna. But there was a big stink about that. But when you talk about mercury in vaccines that's being injected directly into your body and not going through the digestive tract, not a word. Because pharmaceutical corporations have huge, huge advertising budgets, and the corporate media just gobble up that money and look the other way. So, anyway, let's talk about computers. There's a lot going on out there. Yahoo has confirmed 32 million of their accounts have been hacked. And an investigation by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission has confirmed 32 million accounts were breached in a cookie forging attack dating back to 2015 and 2016. The CEO, to show his remorse, is foregoing his annual bonus by way of an apology. My question would be, again, where is the NSA in all of this? Aren't they supposedly being given all of this money and allowed to violate the Bill of Rights to protect our IT infrastructure from danger or threat? They don't seem to be doing a very good job. In fact, they don't seem to be doing the job at all. They may, in fact, be part of the problem. Kaspersky has identified a hacker collective called the Equation Group as being part of the NSA. Now, apparently, there has been a serious problem with a company called Aptos, which is the back-end provider for a lot of online stores. And apparently, shoppers of these online stores had their bank card numbers and addresses stolen by a malware infection at Aptos itself. It wasn't with the online store, it was the back-end processor. And apparently this was going on from February through December of last year. And suspicions are that Aptos knew something was going on, but didn't really do anything about it until customers started complaining. The retailers who had those online stores started complaining to Aptos something was going on. There was a huge amount of fraud with stolen credentials here. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. Back with more about computers after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about computers and security and this growing obsession with the Internet of Things, where everything you own is on the Internet, I think has gone way too far. It's certainly looking at the track record of security issues. We're at a point right now where everything that you put onto the Internet becomes usable for nefarious activity. And we are finding that the little processors that are inside these Internet of Things products are being used to create botnets for DOS attacks, can be used as gateways into your home LAN and your computer. The security is a joke here. And illustrating that is a story that we got out of the Register in Great Britain, where Internet of Things devices from a Chinese vendor were found to contain a hidden back door, and the vendor is refusing to fix it. We like our back door. And apparently the back door was discovered in almost every single device produced by voice over IP specialist DoubleTech, DBLTEK, and appears to have been deliberately built in for use by the manufacturer. This is coming from security firm TrustWave. The firm says it followed a responsible disclosure process, but claims the vendor only responded with modifications that leave the back door still open. TrustWave says the vendor then cut off all contact with them, and TrustWave has since been able to write exploits that open both the new and old back doors. And that is another major area that people are not paying attention to. That companies that are manufacturing things like routers or Internet of Things devices are themselves installing back doors and malware. We know that all of the computers and routers, laptops and everything sold in the United States are backdoored by the NSA. And it still hasn't stopped them, still hasn't allowed them to catch the cyber criminals. Like I said, maybe they are the cyber criminals. Days like this, I dust off my VIC-20. Go back to sending email on that thing. But everything that's connected to the Internet is a point of vulnerability. And let's be honest, ordinary consumers do not have the time or the technical savvy to be checking out the security on all of them. So unplug. Unplug from the Internet of Things. People had a real wake-up call with that Internet-connected teddy bear that was recording the children and the parents. And the manufacturer had their servers hacked into so that people could listen to these recordings that are uploaded over the Internet for language translation, voice command. And it turned out the individual teddy bears themselves could be hacked into very easily with any device with a Bluetooth on it. Open up the web page that's inside the toy's software and look at the recordings. And that includes people with ill intent toward the little children who are playing with this thing. I'm sorry, I can't imagine a reason why a child would need a talking teddy bear anyway. Isn't that what parents are for? Apparently over at GoDaddy, they're having an issue with their internal DNS. They're not saying exactly what happened, but apparently a lot of GoDaddy customers who are using GoDaddy's own DNS are literally cut off from the net right now. And all we're hearing is that everybody's calling up, they're trying to figure out how to get this thing running again. Now, if you have a website at GoDaddy and you have the DNS somewhere else, like DirectNick, you're okay. And I know because some years ago I developed a website on GoDaddy for the Japanese Sword Society of Oahu. And I registered the DNS with DirectNick, and it's still visible. But websites on GoDaddy using GoDaddy's own DNS, they've been having problems with. Now, as you know, the war on the truth has spread to war on comments on the corporate media's websites. A lot of corporate media websites are simply shutting off comments for controversial stories. Research has shown that the comments actually influence the readers a lot more than the content of the article. And it's getting very, very expensive to have a legion of online shills going from article to article to post supportive, pro-agenda comments, only to get lots of ridicule and abuse hurled at them for being obvious shills. So now Google has built an artificial intelligence which will be used to censor the web. And the corporate media is celebrating. We don't have to worry about people getting onto our chat boards and saying you're inaccurate with your story. We can just make it go away at the push of a button. As it turns out, it has a flaw. And apparently people have already discovered that simply misspelling or adding bogus punctuation to words that might be considered toxic language fool the system, such as spelling idiot as I-D-I-I-O-T or S-T space U-P-I-D. Every time they impose another system of control, people figure out ways to get around it. Germany is now pushing for password-free Wi-Fi for everybody, and what they're doing is they've launched a campaign to share for Germans to leave their Wi-Fi connections open so that Germany can finally catch up to other countries in the area of universal digitalization. Now, in the early days of Wi-Fi, that would have been a security disaster. But thankfully, most modern home routers actually have two Wi-Fi systems. There's the main system that connects to your internal local area network, and then there's a second guest network that only links to the outside internet. And that guest network is safe to leave open. And Germany needs to make sure that that distinction is clear to the people, or they're going to have German citizens opening up their security on their Wi-Fi and then find their home computers broken into and critical information being stolen. Now, another story coming on out from Investment Watch blog is pointing out how the NSA has been caught collaborating with the CIA and FBI to intercept shipping deliveries for laptops and PCs purchased online in order to install spy malware and bugs before they reach the new owners. So if you're ordering a computer online and you have a reason to be concerned about privacy, maybe reformatting that disk and installing Linux might not be a bad idea. Now, in my case, for computers that are sent to me or ordered online and then sent to me, those are only allowed to access the guest Wi-Fi here, just in case. Just in case. Of course, it's not like the NSA needs to spy on me. Everything I'm thinking is out there on the website and on this radio show, but it's the way they like to play. Now, more and more we are seeing rather strict regulations and laws regarding the use of telephones while driving. Here in the United States of America, it's being used to push people to buy hands-free headsets, which are a nice thing to have, but it's another example of something that people are being ordered to buy in order to drive their cars, and they might otherwise not bother with. Here in Hawaii, if you are seen using your smartphone while you're at the wheel, it's a $300 fine. And there was a big stink a while ago because there was a gridlock incident down in Waikiki, which unfortunately, sadly, does happen on a regular basis. And so everybody was sitting in the cars. The cars were motionless. They were not moving, so the drivers got out their smartphones. And the HPD just started walking down the line of cars, writing out these $300 each tickets. And they handed out about $30,000 in fines for drivers using their phones in a car that was not moving at all. Big stink in the court system over that one. Over in Great Britain, new drivers who are caught using a phone while at the wheel could lose their license to drive. That's getting a little bit out there. And I understand being distracted while driving is a bad thing, which is why when Claire and I finally do get a newer car, we are not getting one with that big fancy computerized dashboard with all the access to the internet and everything. I just want a car, turn the key, turn the steering wheel, step on the gas, get what you're going to go, hit the brakes and you stop, and that's it. I don't want all the fancy gimcrackery in there because we've seen a lot of accidents. People are fussing with their little console display and they get into an accident. In fact, there's even a commercial that's poking fun at that right now. The guy who's Mayhem. I forget the insurance company. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call from Antonio in Alabama. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Rivero. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to report I was trying to access some pages on the Kitco website here recently as far as, you know, precious metal quotes and stuff like that. And the DNS servers that I was using were having some issues. They didn't want to resolve some of the pages on that website. And so I did a little research and logged into my router and noted that I was, in fact, using Google DNS servers. I don't know if this topic has come up, but if anybody's using Google DNS servers, I think that may be another mechanism they're trying to use to try to censor, you know, what kind of content's available.
Would not put it past them at all. Would not put it past them at all. I would strongly recommend people use OpenDNS or the DNS provided by their local ISP because I agree with you. We shouldn't trust that Google's DNS is not also being used as a tool of censorship.
Absolutely, absolutely. I wanted to also comment.
Let me ask you a question before you move forward. I want to ask you a question. When was it you were trying to get into Kitco?
This has been less than weeks. I would say within the last maybe 5 days. I would say.
Okay, well, do bear in
Kitco Silver specifically.
Do bear in mind that Amazon Web Services had a major outage earlier in the week, and a lot of websites were affected by it, and you need to go back in and try and get to those Kitco pages now to see if the problem still persists. Then it's maybe a DNS issue, but if the pages are reachable, then it was Amazon Web Service. Isn't it amazing how the quality of our Internet in the United States is in serious, serious decline?
I would move to say this was before that particular incident, at least 2 or 3 days before I heard any reporting on that.
Okay.
I did, in fact, change the DNS servers that I was using, and then I was, again, able to access those pages.
Okay, well, that definitely makes the case that Google was trying to block Kitco or was accidentally blocking Kitco. I can't imagine why Google would be interfering with Kitco unless they're at the behest of their bankers. But if Google's going to start playing games with Google DNS, I'm sure they've got a lot of other much more important targets they're going to be going after.
Yeah, I mean, I would advise anybody that's using their DNS servers to definitely drop those. I'm in agreement with you. In fact, I think I am using free DNS servers at this point. So yeah, that's definitely something to look at. And I remember reading a lot of articles that were suggesting to use those servers in the past, you know, several years back.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, so if anybody still was using that method to try to get around some DNS issues, that's probably not plausible at this point.
Well, you know, my website is configured so you can access it directly with the IP, and if you're knowledgeable about your system's hosts files, you can actually create a list of domains and IPs on your own computer that will be searched before it tries to go out to DNS, and that's actually going to make the pages come up even a little bit faster.
Yes, sir, very much so.
Okay?
All right.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now then, about a month ago, there was a big stink where 3 IT workers in Congress were dismissed from their jobs on suspicion that they had improperly accessed computers without the appropriate clearances and permissions. And while they were let go from their duties, apparently they were still technically employed and receiving their paychecks up until today. And apparently the reason for the long delay for the dismissal was because they were Muslim Americans. And they didn't want to appear that we're discriminating against Muslim Americans. No, they were criminals. Or they were spies, or they were merely incompetent. And we don't need any of that inside our government. Over in Oklahoma, the U.S. Geological Survey has come up with a new quake risk map for the entire nation, and they have declared that Oklahoma's risk of a man-made quake now equals San Francisco's risks from a natural earthquake due to the fracking. Now, California has a very strict earthquake-compliant building code. I don't think Oklahoma's buildings are built to withstand a significant quake. But at this point, it is unavoidable that fracking is causing serious problems. And I don't think we should have the fracking wells getting too much closer to that New Madrid fault, which is the location of the biggest earthquake in U.S. history. Everybody thinks the quakes are all out in California, but they had a whopper there on the New Madrid fault. It was so strong it actually temporarily reversed the flow of the Mississippi River. So that was a big one. Fortunately, back then, hardly anybody was living there, but it was a major, major quake. And now Oklahoma, they're getting quakes. They didn't get them before, but ever since the fracking boom, they're getting them now. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break. We're going to be back here with the last segment of our program today. We're going to be talking about Lockheed wants to put a space station in orbit around Mars, and apparently some shocking or surprising fossil and archaeological finds. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. And Lockheed Martin is proposing a new project for Trump's revitalization of our space program. And their ambition is to put a space station in orbit around Mars. The Mars Base Camp is what they're calling it. And it would be staffed by 6 astronauts, and they're planning to do this in 2028, and figure that is the necessary step before landing on Mars itself. And they're using as part of their sales pitch the fact that we orbited the moon before we actually soft landed on it, which is true, but only by a matter of a couple of months. I disagree with Lockheed. We're not talking about the moon just a couple of days away. We're talking about Mars and a very long supply chain. And to me, it's like Columbus sailing all the way across the Atlantic Ocean and then parking his ships off the coast of the New World and never going onto the beach until another ship shows up later on. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think when you're talking about those kinds of distances and that kind of risk out there that far from home, I think a manned Mars expedition ought to just go on out, do the job, and come on back. So we'll see what happens with this project. I'm certainly in favor of more space stations here around Earth. A lot of good work being done up there. Now then, interesting story coming out of the journal Nature. Scientists up in Canada have found these fossils, microfossils, that are dated to 3.77 billion years old, pushing back the horizon of life closer to the creation of Earth itself. And it may seem that the reality is, as soon as a planet forms, the chemistry starts ticking around looking for that organizing principle of replication. Because all life begins with a single self-replicating molecule. A molecule that acts as a catalyst for raw materials around it to make copies of itself. That is the origin of life. Now then, over in Iraq, a lot of people have been very, very upset that ISIS caused quite a bit of damage to a shrine in Iraq. And archaeologists who are over there starting to put it back together have made a surprise discovery that the shrine had been built over a previously unknown Assyrian palace from 600 BC. So, fortuitous or not, they found another ancient ruin inside Iraq. And that's kind of wonderful. Finally, a very tragic story. There's been another case of religious parents who refused to take their son to the hospital. The son died. The parents went to church praying that God was going to resurrect him. And the parents have now been found guilty of first-degree murder. All right, we're going to head on out here. We got stuff to do this afternoon, and we'll be back tomorrow, Friday, with the lovely Lady Claire here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices, share what you know with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.